It was a chilly November night in Edinburgh, Scotland. I had recently moved into a quaint old flat near the Royal Mile, a place teeming with history and, as I would soon discover, haunted by much more than the past. My name is James, and what I am about to recount still sends shivers down my spine. The flat had an eerie charm, with its creaking floorboards and dimly lit hallways. Despite its age, it was cozy, and I looked forward to settling in. However, it wasn't long before I started experiencing the strange phenomena that would eventually lead me to the brink of madness. It began innocuously enough. Unexplained noises, shadows flickering in the corner of my eye, but quickly escalated into something far more sinister. The first night it happened, I had fallen asleep almost immediately, exhausted from unpacking. I found myself in a vivid dream, standing in the very same hallway of my flat. The details were eerily accurate, down to the faint smell of old wood and the chill in the air. As I walked down the corridor, a sense of dread washed over me. I felt an inexplicable urge to turn back, but my feet kept moving forward, as if controlled by an unseen force. I reached the end of the hallway, where a door I hadn't noticed before stood ajar. Inside, the room was bathed in a sickly greenish glow. I peered in, and there, lying on the bed, was a figure shrouded in darkness. It wasn't until the figure turned towards me that I realized, with mounting horror, that it was a mirror image of myself. My doppelganger's eyes were wide open, filled with a terror that mirrored my own. Then, in an instant, I was awake, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. After that night, the boundary between dreams and reality began to blur. Every time I closed my eyes, I was pulled back into that same hallway, forced to relive the nightmare. The figure in the room grew more distinct with each dream, its presence more menacing. I started to dread sleep, knowing that I would have to face it again and again. Days turned into weeks, and the dreams began to spill over into my waking life. I started seeing the shadowy figure in my peripheral vision, feeling its cold breath on the back of my neck. My once cozy flat had transformed into a labyrinth of terror. I tried to rationalize the occurrences. Stress, perhaps, or an overactive imagination, but deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. I became a recluse, avoiding friends and family, fearing they would think me mad. My life was consumed by the need to understand what was happening to me. I scoured the internet for answers, delving into forums and obscure texts on lucid dreaming and sleep disorders. It was during one of these late-night research sessions that I stumbled upon a local legend about a man who had vanished from his home near the Royal Mile centuries ago, his last known address matching my own. Intrigued and terrified, I dug deeper into the legend. The man, a recluse named William Fraser, had been plagued by nightmares similar to mine before his disappearance. According to the accounts, he had claimed that a dark figure haunted his dreams, growing more powerful each night. One evening, he had barricaded himself in his home, only to be found missing the next day. No trace of him was ever found. As I read on, a chilling realization dawned on me. I was experiencing the same torment as Fraser. The dark figure, the oppressive fear, it was all connected. But why me? And what did it want? Desperation pushed me to seek out the help of a local historian who specialized in Edinburgh's dark past. She confirmed the story, adding that Fraser had been researching ancient texts on dream manipulation and the power of the subconscious mind. Determined to find a way out, I followed Fraser's trail, piecing together his research. It led me to an ancient manuscript hidden in the archives of the National Library of Scotland. The manuscript detailed a ritual, not one I intended to perform, but one that described a method of confronting and banishing entities that plagued the mind. It spoke of lucid dreaming as a means to take control, to face the darkness head-on. That night, armed with newfound knowledge, I forced myself into a state of lucid dreaming. As I walked down the hallway once more, I felt a surge of determination. I reached the door, pushed it open, and confronted the figure on the bed. It rose, its form shifting and contorting into a monstrous visage. But this time I did not recoil. I stood my ground, focusing every ounce of my will on banishing it from my mind. When I awoke, the oppressive presence was gone. The flat felt lighter, the shadows less threatening. The nightmares ceased, and the figure never returned. I began to reclaim my life, though the experience left me forever changed. I often wondered about Fraser, about whether he had succeeded or been consumed by the darkness. The mystery of his fate remained unsolved, a chilling reminder of the thin veil between dreams and reality. Life in Edinburgh returned to a semblance of normalcy, but I remained vigilant, knowing that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. My experience had taught me the power and peril of the human mind, and the shadows that lurk just beyond the edge of sleep. The moment I stepped into my new apartment in downtown Toronto, I felt an unsettling chill. The building itself was modern, a stark contrast to the ancient structures I had always been drawn to. Yet, something about the sleek, minimalist interior felt wrong, as if the place had a life of its own. My name is Alex, and the events that unfolded within these walls would forever alter my understanding of reality. The first night was uneventful. I unpacked my belongings, trying to make the sterile apartment feel like home. The view from the 20th floor was breathtaking, the city lights flickering like distant stars. I went to bed early, exhausted from the move, but sleep did not come easily. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional hum of the air conditioning. In the early hours of the morning, I was jolted awake by a strange noise, a faint, rhythmic tapping coming from somewhere within the apartment. I dismissed it as the building settling, or perhaps a neighbor moving about. But as the days passed, the tapping grew more persistent, more deliberate. It always came from different parts of the apartment, never staying in one place for long. One night, as the tapping echoed from the walls, I decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, I scoured every corner of the apartment, but found nothing. The noise seemed to follow me, always just out of reach. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was nothing more than an overactive imagination. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The tapping was soon accompanied by other disturbances. Objects moving on their own, lights flickering inexplicably, and cold spots that seemed to appear and disappear at random. I began to feel like I was being watched, an invisible presence lurking just beyond my sight. Sleep became a distant memory, my nights filled with restless tossing and turning, punctuated by the incessant tapping. As the disturbances grew more intense, I noticed something even more unsettling. The walls of the apartment seemed to be changing, subtle shifts in texture and color that defied explanation. I would leave a room, only to return and find it slightly different, as if the apartment was alive and constantly rearranging itself. Desperation drove me to dig deeper into the history of the building. I scoured old newspapers, online forums, and local archives, searching for any clue that could explain the phenomena. I discovered that the building was constructed on the site of an old hospital, one that had been demolished years ago after a series of mysterious deaths. Rumors of unethical experiments and unexplained occurrences plagued its history, but nothing concrete ever came to light. Armed with this knowledge, I became convinced that the apartment was haunted, a residual echo of the hospital's dark past. I set up cameras and recording devices, hoping to capture evidence of the disturbances. To my horror, The footage revealed fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures and distorted faces, impossible reflections that should not have been there. One night, as I reviewed the latest recordings, I noticed something even more disturbing. A figure standing in the corner of my bedroom, its outline barely visible in the dim light. It was there for only a moment, but it sent a wave of terror through me. I realized that whatever was haunting the apartment was becoming more bold, more tangible. As the figure loomed closer, a sudden realization struck me. This entity was not a ghost, but something far more insidious. The distortions in the walls, the shifting environment. It was as if the apartment itself was a living organism, controlled by an alien intelligence. The figure was merely an extension of this entity, a manifestation of its will. With this understanding came a surge of defiance. I focused all my energy on resisting the entity's influence, pushing back against its oppressive presence. The figure wavered, its form flickering like a dying flame. The walls began to stabilize, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as I asserted my will. In a final act of desperation, I challenged the entity, declaring that it had no power over me. The figure let out a guttural hiss, then dissipated into thin air. The apartment returned to normal, the disturbances ceasing as abruptly as they had begun. In the days that followed, the apartment remained eerily quiet. The tapping, the cold spots, the shadowy figures, all of it was gone. I continued to monitor the place, half expecting the disturbances to return, but they never did. It was as if the entity had been banished, its hold over the apartment broken. Life slowly returned to normal, though I could never shake the feeling of being watched. The experience left me with a deep sense of unease, a lingering doubt about the nature of reality. I often wondered if the entity was truly gone, or if it was merely lying dormant, waiting for another opportunity to assert its will. One thing was certain: I would never look at my apartment or any place in the same way again. The thin veneer of normalcy that covered our world had been irrevocably shattered, revealing the dark, twisted reality that lurked just beneath the surface. And as I went about my daily life, I remained ever vigilant, knowing that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. Nestled in the hills of Minas Gerais, the historic city of Ouro Preto is a labyrinth of cobblestone streets and colonial architecture, a place where the past seems to whisper from every shadowed corner. My name is Lucas, and my encounter with the supernatural in this ancient city is a memory I wish I could forget. It started on a humid evening in August, when I arrived in Ouro Preto for a weekend getaway. The city was celebrating its annual festival, and the streets were alive with music and laughter. I checked into a small, charming posada, its walls adorned with old photographs and artifacts from the colonial era. The owner, a kind old man named João, welcomed me warmly and showed me to my room. That night, as the festivities continued outside, I decided to explore the posada. Something about the place felt off, an eerie stillness that contrasted sharply with the revelry beyond its doors. As I wandered the dimly lit hallways, I noticed a door at the end of the corridor that was slightly ajar. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pushed it open. Inside, the room was filled with an assortment of old furniture covered in dust. In the center stood an antique mirror, its surface tarnished with age. As I approached, I felt a sudden chill, the temperature dropping significantly. The mirror seemed to draw me in, its reflective surface swirling with an unnatural darkness. I reached out to touch it, and as my fingers brushed the glass, a cold, clammy hand grabbed my wrist. I yanked my hand back, stumbling away from the mirror. The room seemed to close in around me, the walls pulsing as if alive. I bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind me. My heart pounded in my chest as I raced back to my room, the laughter and music outside now a distant echo. That night, I had the first of many nightmares. I dreamed of a woman dressed in colonial garb, her face obscured by a veil. She stood in front of the mirror, her hands pressed against the glass as if trying to break free. Her muffled cries echoed in my mind, filling me with a sense of profound dread. I woke up drenched in sweat, the image of the veiled woman seared into my memory. Over the next few days, the nightmares grew more intense. Each night, the veiled woman appeared, her desperation palpable. During the day, I felt her presence, a constant shadow that followed me through the streets of Ouro Preto. I tried to rationalize it, blaming stress and lack of sleep, but deep down, I knew something sinister was at play. On my last night in Ouro Preto, I confronted João about the mirror. His expression grew somber, and he told me the story of Maria, a young woman who had lived in the house during the colonial period. Maria had been accused of witchcraft and locked in that very room, where she died in front of the mirror, her soul trapped within its reflective surface. Since then, every tenant who had stayed in the house reported seeing her ghost. Determined to put an end to the torment, I returned to the room one last time. The mirror stood as I had left it, its surface now glowing with an eerie light. I approached cautiously, my reflection distorting as I drew near. Summoning all my courage, I spoke to the spirit of Maria, promising to help her find peace. The room grew colder, and the veiled woman appeared in the mirror, her eyes filled with sorrow. She reached out, and this time I did not pull away. As our hands touched through the glass, a blinding light enveloped the room. When it faded, the mirror shattered, and the oppressive presence lifted. I felt a sense of relief, knowing that Maria's spirit was finally free. I left Ouro Preto the next morning, the city's charm now tinged with a hint of melancholy. Though I had freed Maria, the experience left me with a lingering sense of unease. The echoes of the past are never truly silent, and the line between the living and the dead is thinner than we realize. To this day, I avoid mirrors, afraid of what might be lurking just beyond the glass, waiting to reach out and pull me into the darkness. Thank you for watching our new scary stories. We hope you enjoyed it. Share your thoughts in the comments below. For more stories inspired by real events or chilling fictional tales, click on the video appearing on your screen now or explore our other horror stories playlist. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling narratives. And remember, what if the shadows in your room are more than just shadows?